Hey, welcome to Movement Church. My name is Josh Tandy, and I'm so glad that you're checking this out. I just thank you so much. We are at the end of our online-only gatherings, and I am so excited about that, but I recognize that for some of us, we're not quite ready to come back, and that is fine. So we're going to continue to be doing this, but next week, we're going to be entering into this kind of hybrid stage, right? Where we will have in-person gathering available to you. We're going to do everything we can to be smart about this and practice social distancing and do what we can, do what's best. And I would just encourage you to do what is best for you and your family. We welcome whatever that is. We just ask you to continue to engage with us. There'll be a lot more detail about that coming out this week. Just watch our social media feeds and check your email inbox. Also, tomorrow night, for those of you who call Movement Church home that are really invested here, we have something called Leadership Community that's happening tomorrow night, Monday night, and we are going to be talking about what this looks like starting on June 21 when we begin to meet in person. So, man, whenever you're watching this, whether you're watching this live on Facebook or after the fact or on YouTube, whatever it is, thank you so much for engaging with us. I recognize that this isn't always the easiest or the best. You know, internet connection being what it is, maybe the kids are being a little restless and different things. You just got life going on. I just appreciate you making time for this, because I believe this, that we are still able to engage together and help one another find and follow Jesus. So my name's Josh, and I'm so glad that you're here with us today, and welcome to Movement Church.
Just justice roll on like a river. Let worship turn into revival. Lord, lead us back to you. So come, move, let justice roll on like a river. Let worship turn into revival. Lord, lead us back to you. King of all generations, let every tongue and nation surrender all to you alone. King of all generations, let every tongue and nation surrender all to you alone. To you alone.
So sometimes things don't go as planned, do they? I mean, a year ago, 6 months ago, February, who would have thought that the last 4 months or so would have looked like this? We didn't plan this, we didn't choose this, but this is where we are. So the question is, what do we do with this, right? What do we do when things don't go as planned? Like, how do followers of Jesus move forward in the midst of whatever it is that is causing a challenge in your life? Well, how do we move forward? I think about this. I was 22, and it was my first ministry job, really one of my first like career style jobs, right? And I go to this awesome church, and I get there in January. And I show up in January, and they tell me I get to go on a mission trip to the Dominican Republic that summer. Awesome news. Can't wait. That sounds like a blast. That sounds like a great way to serve, right? Then they tell me I'm leading that trip. So now this trip has already been in the works. There's students that are going on this trip. There are adults. It's a bigger group. And all of a sudden I got to help kind of lead this, right? So we do the fundraisers, and we do all the different things to kind of come together and prepare, because once we were down there, we were going to be doing like VBS style stuff for kids at local churches. And so we had to get all that figured out, who was doing what, and we had to arrange for, the travel and do some of that work, that last minute detail that was required for it. And we were also going to go down there, and we were going to help with some feeding centers and do some really cool stuff and do a little construction project and all this great stuff, all right? So we fly out of our local airport there, and it's, the day has finally come, and we fly to Atlanta for a connection. And we get to Atlanta, and there's a big delay. And so we're sitting there waiting in the airport. And then we fly from Atlanta to Miami, and there's another delay. There's this big thunderstorm there. And so we sit and we wait. And then finally we go to our last leg of our trip. We go to the Dominican Republic. Now at this point, when we land, we've been up close to 20 hours. Like, it has been a long day. As a leader, I'm trying to keep everybody happy and engaged. Like, there's people that are kind of annoying one another on the trip already and all that stuff. That's totally normal, right? Who wants to spend that much time in an airport or an airplane, right? And so we get there, and I think, okay, we just got to lead everybody. We got to get everybody together, and we got to do this safely. We got to find our missionary contact. They're going to take us back to the place we're staying. Let's go, right? So we get everyone off the plane. Everybody's got stuff. We find the baggage claim. We go to that carousel, and we wait. And then we wait. And then we wait. And the bags stop coming off the carousel. Maybe you know that feeling. But none of our bags, none of our checked luggage made it. And so basically for the next 36 hours, we made do, right? And I'm doing construction, and I'm wearing clothes that I've been wearing already for a while, and it's bad, but we made do, right? Because you think about that, what do you do when things don't go as planned, right? Maybe it's a fun story, kind of like that. Maybe it's something really, really hard, there's tragedy. There's something that just kind of blindsided you. What do we do when things don't go as planned? Whether that's right now in this situation or sometime before, something that's ongoing. What do we do when things don't go as planned? So when we talk about our faith, how does this fit? Because this isn't just a Sunday morning thing, right? So in this series, we've been talking about the three different phases of faith. We've talked about the confident faith, where things are really easy and it just kind of comes naturally, and we have this exuberance. Sometimes people call it being on fire. What a great place to be. Sometimes, or maybe usually that happens at the start of something, maybe when we first believe or we first take a big step of faith, right? And then we can't really stay there, right? Because that's not sustainable, and there's a lot of dependence on our emotion. We want to get to a living faith. Right? I think this is really where we're going to be, where there's an abiding, right? We are part of what God wants and has for us in the world, and we want to be there. It can stand up to things. It is resilient, right? It is something that's is part of our everyday life. It's not just Sunday, it's part of everything and every day, right? But to get there, I think we have to go through that challenge faith time. That time where it feels like we're praying and talking to nobody, or we sit down to read the Bible and it just doesn't connect, or we just don't read it at all, or going to church or being a part of a small group, we just kind of disengage, or there's a lot of challenge, a lot of questions, a lot of doubts and frustrations that we might feel, and we just kind of say, you know what, I need to take a break from this for a while. And it's tough when we're in that challenging phase. It's a challenging faith. We're in that stage, that season, maybe even right now, we're kind of experiencing that. Maybe it's because what you watch on the news, or you think about the tragedies that have happened, the loss of life. You see people who are angry, who are frustrated, who are upset at because of the sin of racism. That are see this as, how can we? I thought we were so much further along, or maybe you're one of those folks that says, this has been going on for a long time. We need to wake up to this. We need to change something. Or maybe you're grieving because of someone you lost during these last 4 months, or someone that is battling the COVID-19 right now. Or maybe it's just something else entirely. It's your story, but you're in that challenging faith. Well, we're going to go back to that story of Moses. We've been spending time with Moses in the Bible, and today we're going to be in Deuteronomy chapter 34. And here's the good thing. The good thing is that we're going to be able to kind of flip to the end of the story. I don't know if you've ever done that. You pick up a book and you flip to the end to see how it ends and see if it's really worth it. We're going to kind of flip to the end of this story. But this has been a journey that Moses has been on. It starts in Egypt, and he leads God's people out of slavery, and these incredible miracles and these incredible plagues, all these things kind of lead God's people out. They're freed. Moses is leading them out, and they go out into the desert. And they go out into the desert for 40 years. I don't think that's what they had planned at the start. I don't think that's what Moses thought. This is what's going to happen. We're going to go out and we are going to spend 40 years. Now, let me tell you this. I would imagine there was all sorts of questions going on. I would imagine that people were really in that challenged faith moment. It's like, this is what we're doing. This is what we've been free to wander around, to live in the desert for 40 years. Well, if we flip to the end of the story, we go to Deuteronomy chapter 34, this is what we pick up. We pick up at the end of the story, at the end of Moses' life, what happens after 40 years of wandering in the desert. They are right there on the precipice, on the doorstep of God's promised land, the land that's been promised to them. And this is what we read. It says, then Moses climbed Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab to the top of the Pisgah across from Jericho. There the Lord showed him the whole land from Gilead to Dan, all of Naphtali, the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the Mediterranean Sea. Then the Lord said to him, this is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when I said, I will give it to your descendants. So Moses is overlooking this promised land. He is seeing what God has in store for him. I can't imagine the joy, the relief, 40 years, all of these horrible things, these consequences, the suffering that's been experienced, this learning hard lessons of God providing, but people still walking away. In 40 years. at the end of his life, he gets to overlook and see what God has for his people. But God doesn't stop talking. I have let you see it with your own eyes, but you will not cross over into it. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab, as the Lord had said. I don't like this story, guys. I don't like this story. This is not how it's supposed to happen, right? This is not how it's supposed to play out. He comes all this way, and he doesn't get to enjoy the land that God has promised him. What disappointment. What justifiable frustration. What shock. I've thought a lot about the graduates in this time, high school and college, and what it's going to look like for them to kind of somehow go through those traditions, to enter into a workforce, to try to kind of take their next step in life. I think about the people who had weddings planned and have had to change things drastically. I think about people who have lost, and I know what it's like to have to do a modified memorial service. I think about small business owners that are just holding on, and those that have already had to shut down. I think about the unemployed. I think about all these people through this time that have gone through so much, and it hasn't gone as planned. It hasn't gone the way that they wanted it to. Now see, the Israelites, they've been in this spot before. They've experienced that frustration, that disappointment. In fact, 40 years earlier, they're in the same position. They're really right there in the same geographical spot, because it wasn't that far in the journey. Remember, they wandered in the desert. They weren't kind of going from point A to point B. No, they made it there real quick. And we read this in Numbers chapter 12, and it says that Moses appoints 12 spies. They're going to go into the promised land. They're going to go and scout out what's happening. And 10 of them come back and say, this is a bad idea. We're going to be destroyed. We're going to be wiped out. And 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, they come back with a report saying, God is giving this to us. We can do this if we follow God. Now, some told us that, with those reports that we should move forward, and some said, no, we've got to turn back. But I think Moses, in that moment, and looking back over the next 40 years of wandering, regretted not going in. Now, of course, God forgives them, but there's consequences to this. They don't go in and take what God has provided, so there's 40 more years of wandering. So I think about Moses as an elderly man. He's right back to where he was 40 years previously. And God says, no, you're not going to go into it. I think about that pain. I think about how unfair it seems. But I think this story bothers me because it forces me to face an incredibly uncomfortable series of questions. What if it's never going to go as I planned? What if I'm going to experience pain? What if I'm going to suffer? What if getting through this, right, doesn't have a happy ending? Then what do we do? What if I never get what I've been praying for? Now, these questions haunt us because we can't get an easy resolution, right? We're kind of left empty with empty answers or cliches, but it begs the question. It begs that question of why. If we're not going to come to the end and get something or get what we want or even get what we think would be good, we think that is something that's right there, we ask why. We ask why all the time, right? We ask, why do we have to suffer? And you can have your own decision or own version of how you ask that. But when we encounter suffering, yes, there are times where it is a consequence of our bad decisions, right? I think we've all been there. Like we did that. We caused that. We inflicted that on ourselves, right? There are absolutely moments where that's the case. We brought it upon ourselves. There's other moments where someone else, their bad decisions, the consequences of their bad decisions are on us, right? We have to deal with it, right? We have to deal with someone's poor decisions. We have to suffer because of others. And sometimes we can find no explanation. And we might try, and we come up with cliches, and sometimes they're helpful, but usually not. But sometimes there just isn't a good answer to that why. Why do we suffer? But I don't want to look for an answer to this question. I want to ask a different question. I want to ask, how do we respond to suffering? Viktor Frankl was this psychiatrist, and he lived through the Holocaust. He survived in the concentration camps during World War II. He suffered. He had this constant fear, the beatings, the starvation. And though Frankl discovered that in all of that, there was one thing that couldn't be taken from a man. He wrote this in his book, A Man's Search for Meaning. He said that those who lived in the camps remember the people who walked through the huts comforting others, the people who shared what they had, the people who protected others, the more vulnerable. That one last freedom, that was kept people alive, that freedom to choose how one's going to live. Because even in the midst of that horrific scene, hell on earth, he saw people still choosing to serve, choosing to love. He explains it this way. He says, suffering in and of itself is meaningless. We give our suffering meaning by the way in which we respond to it. Forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess except one thing, your freedom to choose how you will respond to the situation. Think about all the times that Jesus encounters people who are suffering. He heals them so often, right? He forgives them. He kind of sets them free, absolutely. But there's always this challenge. Maybe it's not always explicit, but I think it's there. I think it's implicit. There's always this challenge to go forward, right? To go and sin no more. Go, you have been set free. Your faith has healed you. Go and make a sacrifice. Announce to the community what has happened to you. Sure, there are times where Jesus tells them that, hey, don't go tell anybody, this is kind of a secret, but it's going and live your life. Go and pursue the good things. Go, come and follow me. When we experience suffering, we have to ask ourselves, how will we respond? How will we take what has happened to us? Acknowledge the pain. We're not trying to be Pollyanna and downplay it, but acknowledge the pain and then move forward and be about something that is better. Jesus promises the full life. And so when we suffer, we can sit in it, or we can move forward into something better. I don't know what is going on in your life. I don't know the challenges you're facing. I don't know the things that are really, really hard. I don't know what that is for you. But I know that you have a choice. You may not feel like you have a choice, but I think you have choices here. And the first choice is how you're going to respond to this. I'm not telling you that you shouldn't seek justice. You know, the word righteousness in our Bibles, it can also be translated as justice. When we read in the Greek the word righteousness, and when we read in English in the New Testament, righteousness or justice, it's the same word in the original. So yeah, we should pursue justice, but that is a better way, right? That is a better way forward. So when we suffer, we should pursue something better. See, for us to get through what we're going through, no, we have to arrive, we have to kind of rise above what we're going through, right? We have to choose to say, I'm not going back. I am moving forward in my attempt, in my faith, as I follow Jesus, right? Jesus has done the work. I get to join in that. I get to be a part of that. I'm adopted into that family. And so I get to experience that full life. So we have to ask ourselves, are we going to let suffering beat us down, define us, or are we going to let suffering transform us? You know, let's have some fun with this. If you're watching online right now, live with us, you know, you can go down there and you can click the thumbs up, give a little like. Give us a like if you've ever run a 5K, a half marathon, a full marathon. You're one of those crazies, or one of the absolute psychotic people who run one of those ultras, right? Give us a thumbs up on that. Or give us a thumbs up if you're fasted. And then not like the intermittent fasting, the dieting program, which I'm sure is great and all that, but fasting in that you are denying yourself food or something else in order that you can draw yourself closer to God. Give us something there. Let us know that you did it. Let's participate here a little bit. Or maybe for you, you've done other things, right? You've denied yourself. You have gone without, right? You have gone without. Because we have heard incredible stories of people giving. I think about, and this is near and dear to my heart, the people who can give a kidney organ donation to someone they love. That's going to radically change their lives. They are going to be on medication for the rest of their life. They are going to be at risk, but they are saying, I want to give life to someone else. Because we have something to consider here. We have to understand we can choose suffering and experience that transformation, but even the unwanted suffering can transform us. Even the things that we didn't ask for, the things that happened to us, this can change us. It can transform our character. It can draw us closer to Jesus. It transforms our values and what we realize is really important. That if we allow God to transform us through this season, whether it's because of the pandemic, whether it's because of the exposure of the sin of racism, or whether it's because something else was already going in your life or is ongoing in your life, we can allow this pain not to be just pain. It is not pointless. We can experience transformation when we submit to God being in charge, when we submit that Jesus is freeing us and calling us forward, when we don't depend on our circumstances. We can move from a challenged faith to a living faith. So we can let suffering transform us. We can also let suffering remind us of the bigger story. This is where we get to this idea of submission. This is really where it happens. We can remind ourselves that there is something else going on here. We're not the star of the story. We aren't the hero. Our job is to be about the hero, be about Jesus. Our job is to serve others, to love others, to invite others into the knowing, saving, transformative belief and faith in Jesus, and then the life of following him that changes not just hearts, not just eternities, but changes communities, changes nations, and changes the world. That's what suffering can do. If we go back to Moses, he dies not going into the promised land. So is he a failure? Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 10. This is kind of the eulogy for Moses. Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those signs and wonders that the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his officials, and to his whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. That sounds like someone who did not fail. Because Moses was part of the bigger story. His life was not a failure. His life was not meaningless. In fact, he played a huge, huge role in all of this. See, I think that when we see ourselves as the bigger picture, the bigger story, the bigger family of God, we see ourselves in our identity, like we talked about last week, as who Jesus says we are. We see ourselves as loved and cherished and valued, and that we have purpose and meaning in life. Then we can begin, when we submit to that, we can begin to be transformed. We can get through what we're going through. We can move from challenged faith to living faith. Now listen, things aren't going as planned. I know that because that's a pretty daggone constant thing, right? I know that for all of us, at any point in life, we can look at ourselves, look at our situation, and say, this is not what I had planned for. I didn't sign up for this, right? There's some aspect of that. Maybe for you want to have a kid. You want to be a mom or a dad, and infertility is kicking your butt. That's not how you planned it out. Maybe for you, you're stuck in a job. Maybe for you, you're searching for a job. That's not how you planned it. Maybe for you, mental health It's a battle every day. No one chooses that. Or maybe you're in a spot where it's addiction. Maybe it's with your health. Maybe it's with your finances. Maybe it's with your kids, your relationships, whatever it is, right? There are all these things where things didn't go as planned. You're frustrated, you're angry, maybe even you're apathetic. You're ready to give up. So what do? Jesus meets all these desperate people. These people who are desperate for healing, desperate for life, desperate for forgiveness. There's this woman who's afflicted with this terrible medical condition. She hemorrhages blood. And there's a crowd in these narrow streets pressed around Jesus. And she somehow comes out, even though people avoided her, and there was all this religious taboo on her because she was unclean. She couldn't go and worship her God. And she reaches out and touches just the hem, just a sliver, just a piece of the fabric of Jesus' cloak, and she is healed. She was desperate for healing. There's this dad. This dad sees his kids suffer. And he's desperate. He goes to Jesus. Jesus, would you please heal him? Please heal him. And Jesus asks him about faith. Do you have faith that I can do that? And the man, in the most beautiful and the most gut-wrenching thing, said, I believe, help my unbelief. Because he's desperate. There's another man that's paralyzed, and his life is living on a mat, holding out a bowl, holding out his hand, just dependent on the gift and generosity and the attention of others. Well, this man must have been something special because he had these friends. And not just any friends, not acquaintances, friends that would carry him to Jesus. And when they couldn't get in the room, they took him on the roof, and they tore a hole in the ceiling, in the roof, and then lowered this man down. What desperation. Not just desperation. These people submitted. They said, what I have planned, what I think, how I'm headed, all of that comes under you, Lord. All of that is second to you, Lord. All of that is informed and changed and challenged by you, Lord. You are the source. You are the one. You are the truth. You are the life. You are that I need. These desperate people that Jesus encounters, they weren't suffering because of things that they did. They weren't living with their consequences. But they still pursued something better. They still pursued Jesus. They still submitted to Jesus. Because when we pursue Jesus, when we submit to Jesus, when we give up trying to fix it ourselves, we get this opportunity to be freed, to be forgiven, to be loved, to be valued, to be saved. We're not going to always get what we want. And even when we submit, it's not like our course is just going to go right back to our plan. It didn't happen for Moses, and I'm not there. But Moses submitted. These people who were desperate accepted that invitation, accepted what Jesus would do for them. But then more than that, they moved forward. They stepped into that life. So what is it that you're going through right now? What is the challenge? Are you going to let it transform you for the better? Are you going to allow it to show you the bigger story and your part in it? In the midst of your suffering, whatever it is, are you going to submit? Are you going to cry out? Are you going to surrender? And then are you going to submit? Are you going to ask for help from God, crying out? Are you going to surrender, letting go of expectations, letting go of your plans? And then are you going to submit and start following the King? That is how we get through what we're going through. Let's pray. God, thank you for Jesus. Thank you for your work, your grace that sets people free, that makes people whole, that brings about life. Thank you for that. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for challenges. Thank you for challenges such as these, not for the pain they bring, but for the transformation they bring. That you work all things to the good. Amen.
Stars they wept, the morning sun was dead, the Savior of the world was fallen. His body on the cross, his blood poured out for us, the weight of every curse upon him. The stone was rolled away. His perfect love could not be overcome. Now death, where is your sting? Our resurrected King has rendered you defeated. And now forever he is glorified. The stone was rolled away. His reckless love could not be overcome. Now death, where is your sting? Our resurrected King has rendered you defeated. And now forever he is glorified.
So every time we get together at Movement, whether that's online or in person, we celebrate communion. We celebrate this simple meal that represents what Jesus has done. And we see in that act that Jesus does at the cross and at the empty tomb. We see in the act that we celebrate with communion, with our Lord's Supper, with our Eucharist. We see how Jesus cries out to God. He does that a lot, several different times. We see how he surrenders. He lets go of expectations. He lets go of preferences. We see how he submits. He submits everything. So when we take communion this morning, right there in your home, you got bread, you got crackers, whatever you got, right? We've done this for a few weeks now. You know the drill. We take that bread and we eat it. And we remember that when we're doing that Jesus gave of his body. And then we drink the juice or whatever that you have. And we remember that Jesus' blood was spilled. And whenever we gather at this table, whether it's online and from physical distance or together or a combination of the two, we have an opportunity to celebrate what Jesus has done. Thanks for being a part of this. We're going to throw the Connect card in the comment section. If you're new around here, we'd love for you just to make yourself known. We'd love to follow up with you and pray with you. You can do the same thing by texting us, that number right there. We just so appreciate you guys, and you guys calling Movement Church your home. We appreciate the fact that there are people that do not live close to us physically, that have kind of come alongside us in these past few months. And let me promise you this. Whatever it looks like moving forward next week with starting in-person services, wherever this is going in the months and years to come, this church and what God is doing here, we will always be committed to this, helping you, helping others, helping people find and follow Jesus. Thanks for being a part of this, and we'll talk to you later.